I look tired. Okay, I just spent the entire day or the entire afternoon watching all four of these films. I've seen the other three before. I've seen Godzilla 2014 and Skull Island, and I saw King of the Monsters quite recently actually, but I forgot all about it pretty much. But I watched them again all of this afternoon, just so I could recap on what it was all about before I saw Godzilla vs Kong, which I've just this second finished watching, and not what I was expecting at all going in. If you're expecting something similar to the first three, Godzilla 2014 and Skull Island and King of the Monsters, think again. Because this film is batshit crazy in a good way, and I'll explain what I mean by that. What we have here is definitely something for the fans, and when I say fans, I mean fans of the original Toho films. This is my opinion, of course. I'm not the biggest fan of the original Toho Godzilla, monster films. I know the basics. I know the basic monsters. I know about Godzilla and Mothra and Rodan and King Ghidorah, and I know about. I know about I've seen the Versus films. I've seen Godzilla versus Mothra, and so I'm familiar with the basics. So I know enough to understand. Well, this is how I see it. I've seen enough to think that Godzilla vs Kong is certainly something that the fans of this kind of thing would certainly want to see, because it is proper eye candy. It looks incredible. First of all, before I get into versus Kong, I just want to go over what I thought briefly about the first three. The original 2014 Godzilla, well, not the original, but the original out of this franchise. I quite liked it. Nothing groundbreaking, but the usual complaints, I think are kind of well known now. We don't see Godzilla until like the last bit of the film when he's fighting the Mutos, and whenever he's on the screen, it's always raining, it's always dark to keep the CGI easier, I suppose. But I quite like it. It's interesting characters going on. It's interesting bringing a family dynamic into the film. But I think the family there, the husband and the wife and the child, I think we've seen that kind of before in disaster, any kind of at least recent disaster films, where we have a family, a husband, wife, child or children, and one of them, the husband or wife, goes off, they get separated in the middle of the film, and then of course disaster strikes and there's a huge tidal wave. And the huge tidal wave comes into the city, and for some reason, hundreds, thousands of people run away from this huge tidal wave for no particular reason. One person always has to climb over a car for some reason, when running away from something. Why is that? What's that going to do? And then the disaster is averted, and then the family get reunited at the end. That's basically what we have in the first Godzilla film, 2014. So that was fine. Skull Island, good. I quite liked Skull Island. Interesting take on the King Kong thing. It's not the original King Kong story, although I think it does echo a couple of bits and pieces from the original King Kong story. But it was good. This is the film out of a franchise that I refer to as the exposition film. Skull Island is the film where we learn a lot more about what's going on with the monsters and about Monarch, the company. There's always a company, isn't there, in these in these franchises to do with monsters and aliens and stuff like that. You know, they're always like got these. They've always got like one name that means that's an acronym, abbreviation. What's the word? You know, like SHIELD, for example, Strategic Homeland, whatever it is, and Monarch means something as well. John Goodman explains what it means in Skull Island. You know, there's always that company, isn't there, that does all that. Anyway, so yeah, it's good. I like the design of Kong in Skull Island. I like the fact that he stands up on his hind legs. That's a nice sort of way of depicting him, to give him more of a sort of a human figure. It all looks great. You know, it's very colourful, and of course, it's set in the late 60s, early 70s. I think it's somewhere just after the Vietnam War, or during. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, when there's when there's something to do with the American Vietnam War, of course you have to have the Apocalypse Now kind of scenario where you come flying in with the choppers or the Hueys or whatever they're called, and you have to have the typical the typical songs that you would expect to hear. You know, you like Creedence Clearwater and the usual patriotic song, you know, playing on a record player as they go in. It's all very it's all very much like that. Not that that's a bad thing. It works. One interesting thing about it is the fact that they all have different directors and they all bring their own sort of unique twist to it. So it all looks great. The cinematography is great. It looks great. Very colourful. The creatures, the monsters, the creatures on Skull Island are very imaginative, very creative. You know, there's a huge sort of ram creature that, you know, with swamp weed, you know, hanging from its horns, and there's a giant squid kind of octopus, and there's a great spider thing with really long legs in the trees. It's a really good scene, that tree, when they're cutting the legs down in the trees. It's pretty cool. There's also a creature that looks like a bloke sits on a log, and the log turns out to be a creature. It's a monster. It's very imaginative, very creative. So I like that. It's quite a good film. I'm rambling a bit about that one because obviously I quite like it. So we'll move on. What was next? Godzilla, King of the Monsters. This King of the Monsters was pure eye candy. It was the story wasn't very good. I can't even remember. It's just a few hours ago since I've seen it. I can't remember. I can't remember much about the story at all, except that Vera Farmiga's character has a machine that's able to control the monsters, or the Titans as they're called, and that's pretty much all I remember about the actual story. However, it looks amazing. It looks amazing. If you want to see all of the, well, not all of them, but the favourite Toho monsters coming together to fight pretty much one another, then this is the one. It looks really good. We have great shots of Godzilla, great shots of King Ghidorah, or Ghidorah, however you say it, great shots of Mothra, great shots of Rodan. These are all the monsters that I'm familiar with, by the way. They all look great. The designs are great. The effects are great. As I say, visually, it's fantastic. Story-wise, it's not great. Character-wise, it's all right. It's not terrible, I don't think, but it's again not brilliant. We don't spend much time getting to know the characters. Same in Skull Island, actually. Skull Island, where Godzilla 2014 took its time, too much time to get going, Skull Island kind of made the opposite. But that too, I think, was a bit of a mistake, because it dives in straight into it. We get to Skull Island within the first 10-15 minutes of the film, and we see Kong again within the first 10-15 minutes of the film. That's fine, but as a side effect of that, we don't really get to know the characters very well. So that's kind of happens in King of the Monsters too, I think. But as I say, it looks incredible, great effects. except again, when the monsters fight, it's still dark, it's still raining. I think there's actually a scene in King of the Monsters where where it's daylight and it's not raining, and then as soon as Godzilla comes in to fight one of the monsters, it starts to turn dark and it actually starts raining on cue. Actually on cue when the fights start, as if it's supposed to look better like that, which I don't, it's debatable, of course, but well, the thing is, of course, I think it's just a filmmaking technique. The idea being that it's supposed to be dark and dramatic. They did it in The Matrix as well. In the last Matrix film, when Neo fights the Smith, of course, it's dark and it's raining. You know, I just think it's supposed to be some sort of film technique to make it more, I don't know, to make it more like a battle, basically. But that kind of makes you ask the question, why not? Why can't we have a battle during the day in the blazing hot sun? You know, would that look bad? I don't know, maybe. But the idea being, of course, that once the battle is over and the monster has been defeated and so on, the sun, then it stops raining and the sun comes out, you know, victorious. You know, it's just part of it's supposed to be part of the filming effect, I think. If you like it, fine. If you don't, fine. You know, I don't mind it really, but it just would be nice to see a monster fight during the day, once or twice. Why not? You know. Anyway, so that's King of the Monsters. I didn't think it was terrible. But it looked amazing, incredible to see all the favourite Toho monsters fighting each other. So, let's get to Godzilla vs Kong. As I said before, not what I was expecting at all. However, I think it's a great nod to the original. How can I put this? I think it's a great nod to the original weirdness. Is that a word? Weirdness of the original Toho stories. Like, just for example, this, as I say, I'm not completely familiar with the entire Toho universe, whatever, but I remember there's this one film, I think it's to do with Mothra, where there's this island with little people on it that sing songs. Have I got that right? This guy is sitting in a hotel room and suddenly he hears voices in the background. It's these two little people telling him about Mothra. I recall that. Now, that's the kind of weirdness that I'm referring to when it comes to Godzilla vs Kong. It's good. It's good. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I didn't dislike it. Well, mostly. Again, visually, it looks great, especially the final battle at the end, which is colourful. It takes place in not Tokyo, Hong Kong. Again, at night, but not raining this time. It takes place at night, but it's lit up all neon and pink and blue, and the buildings are outlined with neon light. It looks great. It looks very neo-noir, very Thor Ragnarok. You know, that kind of thing. But there are bits that don't work, but it's completely trippy. It's a complete... you should watch this kind of a little bit drunk, maybe. You know, so there are scenes in... I think it's Kong Skull Island or something. They start to talk about the Hollow Earth thing. I didn't get that to begin with, and I certainly wasn't expecting it to go this far. But in the film, they actually have spacecraft that actually Kong leads them into the Hollow Earth, and basically the Hollow Earth is just that. It's another Earth. It's another planet, basically, that's inside this Earth. See what I mean? It's ridiculous. But in that kind of Toho Japanese kind of vivid imagination kind of way. I hope you know what I mean by that. I'm trying to... it's what you would expect in one of the original Toho films. Like islands with little people. just for example. So yeah, they go into basically this other planet Earth, this hollow Earth. Inside this Earth is basically where all of the Titans come from. I think I've got that right. Except for Ghidorah. Apparently there was something to do with him coming from somewhere else. I don't know. Like I say, the stories don't really set right in the head. But so yeah, they end up going into this hollow Earth, another planet basically, and it becomes very much like sort of Journey to the Center of the Earth / there's a bit of, I don't know, there's certainly more sci-fi to this one than the other three. So that's the thing. In this one there are spaceships, and there are sci-fi spacey vehicles, and there's sci-fi spacey machinery, and there's a lot of that going on. It's certainly more out there than the other three. Again, not a bad thing. I'm not saying it's bad. It's good. It's a good film. I liked it. I was enjoying it, but it's trippy, man. It's trippy. It's very weird, in a good way. It's you just have to keep in mind that these ideas, these characters and these ideas, they come from an original franchise that sometimes became a little bit ridiculous, in a good way. Jumped a couple of sharks and really stretched the imagination. And this film is basically a nod, in my opinion, it's a nod to that kind of style and that kind of story and that kind of film. So I think, as I say, I think the fans of the original Toho films are going to like it for that. Again, the story, well, as far as ridiculous stories go, it makes sense. I understood it. As I say, it's completely outrageous in a good way, but it's outrageous. You need to just be able to sort of go with it and not question too much in this film in order to enjoy it. Luckily, I'm able to do that. So, so I was okay with it. I enjoyed it. What else? The acting. We've got some of the cast from versus the King of the Monsters back. Some are new. They're okay. One thing I don't like, and this is just me, this is just a personal thing. I don't like the three the comedy duo, the three characters that go that sneak into a facility. To me, that just seemed a bit unnecessary. I think because all they seemed to do was just go in and crack jokes that weren't that funny. They were kind of annoying, actually. One of them is the girl from Stranger Things. What's her name? Millie. I've forgotten her name, but she's back. And there's also it's the guy from Deadpool 2, the kid, the Australian kid. Have I got that right? It's Firefist. Is that his name? From Deadpool 2, he's there. And there's also another guy. And basically, the three of them, they just crack jokes the whole time. Then they don't really, apart from just sneaking around and discovering things, they don't actually do anything. Not really, which I found kind of annoying. I don't like those kinds of characters that just sort of crack jokes and do funny things just for the sake of it. You know, the guy is there, he's in the facility, he's taking pictures. You know, just to look at me, I'm funny. You know, I'm taking pictures. You know, and there's also a scene where they enter a big facility that's huge, and they just stare, and suddenly he just screams. He just goes, "Ah!" And of course, the other two, they jump. And, you know, that's supposed to make you laugh. I don't find that funny, really. I find it more annoying. It's just there for the sake of it. So I didn't really like that, really. I had nothing against the characters in general. I just didn't like what they did in the film. But that's just one thing. Apart from that, everything else, apart from completely over the top outrageous, I quite liked. It was, apart from the three characters there, it was funny in parts. Nice little girl who does sign language with King Kong. Oh, I like that. Kong. I like the idea that Kong understands sign language. That's a nice sort of modern take, because there are apes and chimps and in the world, and gorillas in the world, that do understand. They genuinely do understand some forms of sign language. So that was a nice touch. I quite liked that. The idea that Kong is able to talk sign language with this little girl, who's very sweet, this little girl, actually. So I like that aspect. Yeah. Other than saying that this film is just completely outrageous in a good way, I don't really know what else to say. The fighting is good. There's two fight sequences. I think it was two, between Godzilla and Kong. The first one actually is pretty good. It's short, but it's good enough to. It's a good introduction. It's a good fight to get you going, to get you into it. They fight in the ocean on board these aircraft carriers or something, and it's actually quite dramatic. It's very good. Kong is chained down onto this boat, and you can see Godzilla coming. It's kind of tense, actually. It's suspenseful, and Godzilla's coming in the ocean, swimming. I love that thing with not the fins, his spikes pointing up when he does that. That's pretty cool. So yeah, the idea is that Kong has to get free from his chains before Godzilla arrives, and then the fight ensues, and it's a pretty good fight. But of course, the main fight takes place at the end. As I say, it takes place in Hong Kong, in the neon glow of Hong Kong, and it looks great. There's one other thing. There's a third. Yeah. Spoiler alert. Should I spoil? I'll spoil it. You can stop. You can stop watching if you don't want to know too much about what happens. But Mecha Godzilla's in this, and yeah, it's fine. It's fine. This whole thing about. The idea is that this new company, not Monarch, another company, a bad guy company, has built a Mecha Godzilla, and again, this is totally outrageous in a good Toho kind of way. But they're using one of Ghidorah's heads wired up to a neural network, and they're using it to hypnotize people, henchmen, to control. Have I got this right? To control Mecha Godzilla with these weird visor things. It's completely silly. It is silly, but Mecha Godzilla itself is fine. It doesn't really seem to, other than shoot the fire out of its mouth. It doesn't seem to do that much as far as robotics go. It has a tail a drill on the end of its tail, which is fine. Does it do anything else? I can't remember. Oh, I'm sure it does. Maybe it has guns or something, a thing like that. But it's okay. One thing I do like, and this goes for all of the films, is the music. The music's pretty good in all of the films. The first one, it sticks to the sort of traditional sort of Godzilla. I refer to it as the stompy music. It's the music kind of goes dum dum dum. To me, that's stompy music, as in stomp, stomp, stomp. Yeah, so it's very dramatic and very well orchestrated and well played, and it really gets the feels going. I will say that. The first one's good. Of course, as I say, in Skull Island, there's a lot of music and songs that you would expect from that kind of Apocalypse Now-ish kind of film, which is good. I like that kind of music. The third one, to accompany the visuals, as I say in King of the Monsters, the music is also very big and bold and quite beautiful, actually. So that's good. And in this one, it's good. It's different. It's good, but it's in this one because we keep coming back to this thing about gods and monsters. This one establishes more of the in King of the Monsters. Of course, we establish that Godzilla is the true king of the monsters, as opposed to Ghidorah, who fights for the throne, as it were. In this one, it's more to do with Kong, in being more of a King Kong. There's even a throne reference, which is again silly, but it looks pretty good. And it's, as I say, it sounds good too, because the music becomes a bit more sort of, I don't know if regal is the right kind of word, but the music sort of, there are moments where the music really swells up beautifully, when there's a moment where Kong discovers his home in this Hollow Earth place, and he sits on a throne as the king, and the music swells, and it sounds very beautiful and sort of ethereal. But it sounds very powerful and, mighty, and it's quite gorgeous, actually. The music's very good in all four of the films so far, very good. One of my favourite things about them, I'll say that, the music. One thing I do like about it is this question about who are the gods and who are the monsters. What does God mean and what does monster mean? Because of course they keep saying that, they keep using words God and monsters. It kind of, there's this age old question about yes, these creatures, they could be viewed as monsters, but then so could humans, and of course that raises the question, what do you do with, just because there are some monstrous humans in the world, does that mean that all humans deserve to be, wiped off the face of the earth? Same goes for these monsters, these titans as they're called. Just because one or two of them are villainous, does that mean that every single one of them are monsters and should be killed? Questions like that, which I quite like. We keep coming back to that in every single one of the films. It keeps coming back to that question, gods and monsters. It's basically gods versus monsters, I suppose. The effects in all four of the films, I'll include all of them here. They're for the most part, the fight sequences are very good. The monsters look great, especially Godzilla. He looks pretty good. There are a few sort of hit and miss effects that don't quite work, especially in Skull Island. I seem to notice that there were a few sort of the smaller animals, like deer and that sort of thing, that didn't look quite right. They looked a bit sort of video gamey, PlayStation kind of thing. But you can't expect it to be 100% perfect. But for the most part, I think the effects sort of add up. Kong, personally, I thought Kong looked a bit better in Skull Island than this one, than versus Kong. I don't know, there was just something different about him in this one that I've just seen. It's certainly, one thing I will say about this one is it's certainly more comical. It's more comic strip. Like, for example, the very first time we see Kong in this film, in Godzilla vs. Kong, the very first time we see him, he wakes up. It's a bit like Shrek, the beginning of Shrek. He wakes up and, in the morning, and the sun's coming up, and he looks at the sun and he takes a deep breath in, and you see him walk off and he scratches his arse, like we do when we wake up in the morning, and he has a shower in a waterfall, and it's very, it's very comical like that to begin with. So it's different to Skull Island, I think. But as I say, it's a very strange film in a good way. So yeah, that's pretty much my initial thoughts on Godzilla vs. Kong. As I say, I'm not the biggest fan of Godzilla and King Kong and Toho, but I do appreciate it. I think that's where I stand with this kind of thing. As I said in the previous video, I liked the Power Rangers growing up, which of course is, features Japanese fighting monsters. So there are references to that. I appreciate it for what it has done. I appreciate the franchises, the universe of it, and I appreciate the characters. Godzilla and King Kong are two of the most famous, movie monsters in cinema history. And I certainly appreciate that. You can't fault it. So yeah, Godzilla versus King Kong. Godzilla versus Kong. Is that right? Is it Kong? It's good. It's good, enjoyable, exciting. It's a sci-fi film this time, as opposed to the other three, which I personally didn't think they were. Not really. I would say the first three are more sort of to do with... There are fantasy elements to the first three, but this one goes full on sci-fi. So yeah, there's that. You need to have, as I said earlier, you just need to go with it. Don't question too much, and just go with it and enjoy it for what it is. And keep in mind that Toho did this kind of thing in the original Toho films. They did do this kind of thing. They did stretch the imagination. They did jump a couple of sharks. They did go a bit sci-fi occasionally. Very fantastical, almost fairy tale to a certain extent. They did do that. So that's why I think this kind of works. I don't think it would have worked in any other film. So yeah, I think that's how they got away with it here, because I think this film has probably the best critical reviews out of all of them. I think that's what I've read. I've seen a few reviews of this. So I think that might be why it is. I think because it's a nice callback to the original Toho stuff. That's why I personally think it's good. If you can keep that in mind. So yeah, Godzilla vs Kong. It's a fun sci-fi monster mash. It's completely ridiculous. But I mean, in this particular instance, I mean that as the biggest compliment. Because don't tell me that some of the original Toho films weren't ridiculous either. In a great way. In a great imaginative way. I think I've said pretty much all I have to say on it at 12 midnight after a very long afternoon watching all four of these films. Will there be more? They've said, at the moment it sounds to be a bit 50-50. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But I think we've seen enough for now. We finally managed to get Godzilla and Kong going up against each other, and boy do they in this one. Okay, so I'm going to sign off now, and let me know what you think in the comments. And don't forget to share, subscribe, like, and all that jazz. So until then, until the next time, see you folks, bye-bye.